You're listening to the Potaholics Comedy Network. Potaholics.com.
Welcome to Codex, a brief history of video games. My name is Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week we are on Chapter 15 of the Ultimate History of Video Games. This chapter is called The Aftermath. Mike, take it away.
Ooh, The Aftermath. We're going to first start talking about Nolan Bushnell's life outside of Atari. So we talked about it a little bit, where he had Chuck E. Cheese.
Yep, he did some pizza stuff.
So he did a lot of Pizza Time stuff. Pizza Time theaters and Chuck E. Cheese were his. Now, I should also mention before we move on, it's a very businessy chapter, this episode. We're talking about business.
Talking about business.
A lot of companies. We're going to talk about Nolan Bushnell, but we're also going to talk about how other companies like Coleco and Mattel are faring after the fall.
The crash.
The crash we talked about last episode. So he had become, essentially, Nolan Bushnell was now a high roller, is what they said in the book.
Oh.
Yeah, he's a rich guy. He owned 2 jets, and he...
What do you need 2 jets for?
I don't know. I was actually wondering about that.
You can only fly on one at a time.
Yeah, you can't, have, one on each foot, like a shark that you're riding.
Be sweet. Maybe he did. He's just, jet skiing through the sky on 2
that would
jets.
Be. You know what? My guess is he did that.
Yeah, okay. All right.
He actually once loaned his Learjet to George Bush Sr. when he ran as vice president under Ronald Reagan.
Oh, okay. So one to ride in and one for the president to ride in.
Yeah, one to ride in and one to loan out to politicians.
Okay,
he actually was kind of
sense.
dabbling in politics, I think. They briefly mentioned that in the book, but they didn't really go into a lot of detail. He founded Catalyst Technologies in 1981, and this was Bushnell's incubator firm, where Bushnell supplied his resources of space, supplies, and finance in exchange for part ownership of the businesses he incubated. So it's a lot like in the joke in Silicon Valley, like he runs an incubator. It's that, but it's actually real.
Yeah.
And really a big business. So that was his main thing he did.
He was Erlich Bachman only.
Yeah, he was like Erlich Bachman a little bit. But at this time, Chuck E. Cheese was doing pretty well. It had been going for 3 years, and at this time he had 204 restaurants going strong. Okay, really crushing it. But he did find competition, though, in an unlikely place.
What was this unlikely place?
So there's a man named Robert Brock of the Brock Hotel Group, and he actually he had the most Holiday Inns in the Midwest at this time. He was the Holiday Inn magnate, I guess you want to call him that. And he actually had a licensing deal with Bushnell to make a bunch of Chuck E. Cheeses in the Midwest and kind of take over that market. And what happened, though, is he found someone named Aaron Fletcher, who was an inventor, and that Aaron Fletcher found a way to create the same robotic animals that Bushnell had made, but for cheaper. And they're just as good. You can't tell a difference.
And everybody knows the heart of these pizza places is
the animatronics.
Robots.
Yeah, the animatronic sing-songs.
Yep.
Which I find creepy now. A little unsettling.
Which is what nobody I have ever known has gone to Chuck E. Cheese for.
Yeah, no one.
These robots.
Yeah, everyone goes for the games, not their cardboard pizza or the robots.
I'm just trying to get erasers with my tickets, you know?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And get those Tootsie Rolls. Those are 1 ticket each.
Oh, yeah.
That's how you spend the change. I remember that.
Yeah.
But through this, Robert Brock said, you know what, Bushnell? I'm canceling the deal, and I'm going to make my own chain called Showbiz Pizza. Wow. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yes.
Yeah, because Showbiz Pizza had a band, and their band was named Billy Bob was the lead bear, and he ran the band The RoccoW Explosion. And I remember correctly, when I talked about Chuck E. Cheese 3 or 4 episodes ago, I mentioned that people have bought these bands and put them on YouTube playing famous songs, and now we're here. We're talking about them now in the book, so a little foreshadowing, unintentional foreshadowing. But yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah, so he actually ended up taking over the Midwest market with Showbiz Pizza and the RoccoW Explosion. Bushnell sued him and did win, and he got a percentage of the Showbiz Pizza revenue from the first 160 restaurants.
That's a lot of money, probably.
Yeah, I don't know why it was 160 specifically, but he got those first ones. Yeah, so other problems at the time with Chuck E. Cheese included their ho-hum pizza and the fall of arcade games.
Chuck E. Cheese pizza was never good.
It was bad. It was always bad. And I think in the book it even mentions that they knew it was bad, but they figured, well, people are coming not for the pizza, but for the games and the atmosphere and the show. So the pizza could be lacking, but it's finally catching up to them now. And their revenues started to slip in 1982. And they were operating in the red by 1983.
Oh, this is like peak of the crash. So.
Yeah, so it kind of followed the crash exactly.
Valley of the crash.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. That Bushnell claims to be unaware of the problems at Chuck E. Cheese. He said they were managed by a different team that he hired, and while he was traveling and working on Catalyst. So he's like, I had no idea it was failing.
Sounds like you done goofed by hiring the wrong people, Bushnell.
Yeah, exactly. Bushnell had a 7-year non-compete agreement with Atari at the time, if you remember correctly, and Warner Communications. So he couldn't go into the game business at all.
Oh. Did he adhere to this?
Absolutely not. 8 months before the agreement was set to expire, he actually bought a company called Vidya Inc. for $2.2 million. And they were a game company actually founded when a bunch of Atari employees left. These were Atari alumni Roger Hector, Howie Dellman, and Ed Rotberg. And if you remember correctly, I think it was a couple episodes ago, we were talking about how Kassar kind of pushed designers away, especially once third-party publishing came out and they could realize they could make their own games and make way more money. And these are 3 people that left because of that. I don't remember who they were. They were all very successful in their own ways. Roger Hector worked with Alcorn on the Cosmos console. We talked about that a little bit ago. Howie Dellman was a brilliant engineer and built the first vector graphics game called Lunar Lander. We touched on that a couple episodes ago. And then Ed Rotberg created Battlezone.
Oh, my man.
Yeah, and he also was like one of the best coders at the time, said in the book. He was really good at it.
He's just super good.
Super good at it. So he now, I guess Bushnell's reunited with his dream team, you know? So it's pretty cool at this point. And he renamed Vidya to Sente. And Sente is the Japanese word for checkmate. If you remember, Atari was the Japanese word for check.
Ooh.
So Bushnell is directly calling out Atari and Warner Communications at this point. Like, it's his way of saying, I'm coming for you.
You know what? Looking back on it, they really should have picked not Atari. They should have picked Sente.
Oh, yeah.
From the beginning, because then they wouldn't have been able to be one up.
Yeah, because he was like, I'm picking Sente. And he's like, well, I'm going to be Atari, which is, never mind, that doesn't work. Check doesn't work. It's already checkmate. It would have failed.
Yep.
But yeah, so it's Sente now. And Bushnell bought Sente, though. This is very important, as a subsidiary of Pizza Time Theaters, because he hoped to distribute the very games he made at Sente to Chuck E. Cheese locations.
Oh, that's clever. Because
Yeah.
then you can get your games out there in your own locations, and then hopefully that's sort of some advertising. For
Yeah. It's actually an example of vertical marketing, which we will touch on later.
All right.
I did a little I learned a little bit about marketing and business this episode.
All right.
I feel pretty good about myself. Bushnell now decided to join a boat race, because if you're rich, if you didn't know, he's worth $200 million. You have to get into yachting. It's actually law. It's United States law. You have to become a yachtsman.
That's right. You got to join the yacht club.
You got to put on fancy jackets.
Yep. And there is a requirement for how many jets you need to own. That's why he probably has 2 jets.
2 jets, 800 yachts. I don't know. That fact is not confirmed if Bushnell owned 800 yachts. But I do know he owned one, because he entered the Transpac race, which was a race between California and Hawaii. And the race takes place in July. And Bushnell was like, I'm going to be the best at this. And he hired a very, very, very top experienced crew and built a well-designed yacht he named Charlie.
Okay.
Big thing about Charlie and that crew won his first race in 9 days. So the first time he went into the Transpac race, he won it in 9 days.
Dang. How far is the Transpac race?
From California to Hawaii. I don't know how long that is.
It's several thousand miles.
Several thousand miles. It's a lot.
Pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, boat time, 9 days. You're making pretty good. Like, you're moving.
Yeah, that's really cruising.
Because it's a yacht, too. It's not sailing. So you're definitely just motoring your way around. Probably listen to Sister Christian motoring, you know?
Motoring.
We can't sing too much of it.
Nope.
Because we'll have to pay for it, unfortunately.
Don't get copyright.
Perfect. While racing in the Transpac race, Nolan Bushnell got the news that a guy at Pizza Time Theaters he hired to run the restaurants named George Hellick changed the operational ratios and essentially ran Pizza Time Theaters and Chuck E. Cheese out of business.
He just crashed that jet and
but
yacht.
I want to say this is also Bushnell's side of the story. It's like what he said. He's like, George Hellick ruined everything for it. He completely blames him. If you notice, there's a long-standing pattern in this book where Nolan Bushnell never really held himself accountable to anything.
It's always somebody else's fault.
Yeah, exactly. It's always someone else's fault. So they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and Bushnell retired from the company of Chuck E. Cheese and Pizza Time Theaters later that year. It's important to note that Showbiz Pizza then acquired Chuck E. Cheese.
The competition bought Chuck E. Cheese, and now they own both.
And then Brock ran both of those companies until 1990, when then he dropped his own thing, Showbiz Pizza and the Rock-afire Explosion, and he made it all Chuck E. Cheese. And that's how a lot of those people got those machines to make YouTube videos.
Oh, because they got rid of the
whole band. They just converted every Showbiz Pizza into Chuck E. Cheese. It's amazing that Chuck E. Cheese still exists today.
Yeah, Chuck E. Cheese had a good brand, I think, going for it, even after they went under. I think their brand was just stronger, and so they just were like, well, they're all Chuck E. Cheese now, I guess.
I mean, it's an adorable mouse. Although a bear named Billy Bob, that's pretty great.
Yeah,
and if you look at the videos of the band playing, it's pretty fantastic.
I need to find some of those.
Yeah, we can look at some after the episode. It's pretty great. Also, while this was going on, there's some changes at Atari.
Oh, boy.
So, Ray Kassar, is it Kassar or Kasser? I think I'm in both.
Kasser. Let's just go Kasser.
Yeah, Kasser. He resigned as CEO from Atari in July of 1983.
This is very close to the crash.
Very close. And he got into some trouble that tainted investors when he sold 5,000 shares of Warner Communications stock right before an announcement that Atari's profits were lower than expected.
That's right. We talked about this last week.
Yeah. So even Steve Ross, the chairman of Warner Communications, took a lot of flack for Atari among investors. Rupert Murdoch, you know him?
Oh, yeah.
Big name. He
Big.
planned a hostile takeover of Warner Communications, and Ross is like freaking out. He's like, no, don't take it over. I love it, you know? So he turned to Herbert Siegel, who was a chairman of the Chris Craft Industries, and I think they make boats. Like, Chris Craft is a boat company.
Chris Craft will make you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. And Siegel bought 29% of Warner's voting stock and essentially kind of saved them. But now there was a lot of pressure on Stephen Ross to get Atari profitable.
Oh, boy.
So now he hired a 42-year-old young buck CEO named James Morgan.
Hot shot.
Yeah, he was a hot shot. Top Gun. I don't know. What other nicknames? Maverick.
Iceman. Wait, we're just
Goose. Morgan made a big name for himself at Philip Morris selling cigarettes, because that's what you did back then. You just sold some cigarettes.
That's what they still do.
Yeah, exactly. Morgan took the deal because he admired a man named Lee Iacocca, who years earlier saved Chrysler from the brink of bankruptcy. And so he was like, you know what? This is my shot. I'm going to take Atari and I'm going to save it. And he actually says in the book, Phil, it says that he took the deal 48 hours after meeting with Stephen Ross. He's like, I'm going to do this. Here we go.
He's like, I want to save this company.
Yeah. He's like, I'm going to save it and we're going to make it better.
Yes.
But it's important to note that Morgan, much like Kasser, we just said it. I'm just going to change it every time I say it. He actually didn't know anything about technology. Nothing.
Nothing at all.
Nothing. He actually didn't see the point to it all. He's like, why would anyone want a computer in their home? He's like, I don't understand what the point of this is. And he even said, he asked around different members of Atari, and they're like, we don't know. He just didn't get it. So the first thing he did at Atari is he cut the domestic workforce from 9,800 employees to 3,500 employees.
Ooh, that's a big cut. That's more than half.
Yeah. He also moved all of their manufacturing from California to Hong Kong and Taiwan.
Oh.
So he is cutting. But there was also another outside force that was killing Atari's business at the time, and that was home computers.
Oh, man. Jaybird.
We're into it now.
Yes.
Hope you're ready to play some Jaybird. Jaybird was... No, I'm just going to Jaybird history. Okay, founded by Jack Tramiel, it was Commodore International. That's the name of the business. Jack Tamriel, I always want to say Tamriel, from...
I was reading it too.
You were doing the same thing? I was like, it's not Elder Scrolls. So... it's probably Jack Tramiel, actually. He was a Jewish from Poland, and he was a Holocaust survivor who came up to America and worked his way from super poor to rich. He's an American success story.
All right.
As a teenager, he was sent to Auschwitz, the horrible concentration camp. He worked his way to survive but he found out that if he was a volunteer to build the Autobahn, to work on the roads, he figured they had to feed him because it was work. They have to feed someone if they want to keep working. That's just the way it works. And he did that, and he survived 6 years in Auschwitz. Yeah, which is just amazing. Post-World War II, he moved to the United States and joined the Army. He was stationed in Fort Dix, New Jersey, and he learned to repair typewriters there. And then when he left the Army, he decided to start his own typewriter repair store in the Bronx.
Okay.
Yeah. So after that, he moved to Toronto in 1955, and that's when he founded Commodore International. He won a contract to assemble typewriters for a foreign firm, and in a few years, they were manufacturing their own typewriter machines. The book doesn't say why specifically they had to close the manufacturing area years after this, but they did, and they ended up going with a company called RoccoW to manufacture their products. So they would end up designing the typewriters, and then RoccoW would manufacture the typewriters.
Okay.
Tramiel then developed an ability to see trends. So he saw the calculators would replace electromechanical adding machines and the typewriter. So he set up a partnership with Casio in 1960, and then by 1969, Commodore had their own calculator manufacturing plant.
Oh, so he was probably seeing, he's like, typewriter is going to be replaced by computers.
He can see the future.
Let's get in on this.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he jumped on in. And his biggest move he ever made was when he purchased MOS Technologies for $800,000. Now, we've talked about MOS Technologies before.
Yeah, because they make the 6502, right?
Yep, the 6502 microprocessor that is used in the Apple II, the Atari 400, and the Atari 800 home computers. So Tramiel was known as a cutthroat East Coast style businessman, and he often paid debts intentionally late. At Commodore, he referred to his business philosophy as, quote, the religion, and he made many, many enemies in Silicon Valley. That's one thing about this guy is he is the definition of like a cutthroat businessman.
Yeah.
Like when you think of like an evil businessman, the way he works, this is probably, I feel like part of it's built on Jack Tramiel.
So he didn't pay his debts. How did he get?
So here's how it worked.
Okay.
All right. Al Alcorn described it in the book, and this is a direct quote from him. Commodore did its usual Jack Tramiel stunt, not paying the bill. If your guys are dumb enough to keep shipping Jack Tramiel and Commodore product, he lets them keep shipping, and then pretty soon Commodore owes them so much money that the business shipping the product runs out of cash flow, and they find themselves out of business. At that point, Commodore buys that business and like essentially forgives their own debt.
That's a pretty big gamble on the side of Commodore. Like, they're just like, no, we're not going to give you any more until you pay us.
Yeah, it's a big gamble, but then they'll just move on to the next person. Because I think Commodore,
I guess they would have paid their
so
debts
big
at that point, probably.
Yeah, they're just so big at this point, I think.
Yeah.
So they were known as, Tramiel was also known as being a very angry boss. He did mass firings. He yelled at employees. He slammed his hands on his desk a lot. California Magazine once listed him as the third place on their Bosses from Hell list.
Oh, so real nice guy.
Yeah, real hard guy to work for. In the book, there's also a part they go into about Jack Tramiel and C. Powell Morgan, the president and primary stockholder of Atlantic Acceptance, doing some really shady business deals. It doesn't really relate to video games. I think it's just kind of an example of his character, another one of the many examples of his bad character. But involved the two of them essentially creating shell companies and transferring funds and then pocketing the interest to these fake companies. So, yeah. But
stuff that's like technically legal, but like just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, and I think it says that the C. Powell Morgan guy passed away before they could actually investigate into this, and at that point Tramiel was gone, so they're just like, whatever, because it was in Canada and he's in the U.S. now. So one thing that Tramiel did say is, we need to build computers for the masses, not the classes.
Nice.
Yeah,
good rhyme.
That's a good quote. The book says he also bullied his engineers into finding cheaper ways to manufacture components. So
how does that make it cheaper?
Make it cheaper. I'm stuffing you in this locker.
Okay.
So he actually did something kind of like genius here, and we talked about this earlier. Vertical marketing is how Commodore was able to produce computers very cheap. In the definition of vertical marketing, by the way, in Wikipedia is a vertical market is a market in which vendors offer goods and services specific to an industry, trade, profession, or other group of customers with specialized needs. What that translates to Commodore is they owned MOS Technologies that built the microprocessors for the computers, so they could purchase them at cost.
Right.
They weren't dealing with other vendors. They were dealing with themselves. So another example of this was when they wanted a printer, they bought a dot matrix company that made printers, so they could include the printers in the full package of a Commodore computer for way cheaper.
It's a very expensive way to do business, but it's a very good way to make things cheaper for the customer. It's Apple operates like this a lot, although I don't know if they necessarily pass the savings on to the customer, but they do operate this way where they'll be like, that's a great app. We'll buy it and we'll include it in iOS in like 2 years. Or something like that.
how they made Siri. They
That's
bought
how they
the
made
company.
Siri. The new iOS 12 has a thing called Shortcuts, which is basically exactly what an app called Workflow does, which they bought about a year ago. They have a habit of doing that, and also buying things like silicon manufacturers and stuff like that. So it allows them to pocket the profits on all that.
Yeah. So Commodore, also big fans of doing this. And this technique was huge for them because when Commodore released their first computer, the PET computer, in 1977, it was the first home computer to retail for under $1,000.
Oh, so they did this, and then they would make their computers cheaper so that they could like win in the market.
Essentially, yeah. They're like, oh, our computers are just as good as the other people, but they're way cheaper, was how they would sell it. After a near-death experience they talk about in the book, which is kind of crazy, like he was in a plane and it caught on fire.
Whoa.
Yeah, Tramiel was in a plane flying, it caught on fire, and it stayed on fire the entire time until they landed because like nothing worked. It was like a coffee machine wire faulty thing that like lit half the plane on fire. They stood on the other half and then tried to land, but they couldn't find an emergency landing, so they ended up just going to their destination with half this plane on fire.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Everyone survived. But after that, Tramiel ended up saying that it was God telling him not to fly so high, is how he put it.
Literally and metaphorically.
Yeah. In 1981, Commodore then released the VIC-20 computer, and this computer was under $300, which is really cheap for that time. Just 4 years, and it was released like just 4 years after, too, the PET computer. So that's 4 years, and the price dropped to $700.
Holy moly.
Pretty
and
huge.
It was better. The VIC-20 was better than a PET.
Yeah, and it came with 5K of RAM and 16 color graphics. Ooh, nice. Look at those colors. It had commercials with William Shatner in it, too, which I think is, that's going to sell anything.
Yeah. There's some great commercials from this era.
Oh, yeah. We're going to go into those commercials in a second. The VIC-20 was a major success. The book notes that while Atari faltered in 1982, Commodore sold over 800,000 VIC-20s worldwide.
Atari faltered because their consoles were not selling, but computers were doing fine.
This is the age of computing now. Now, this is the most famous one. This is big computer that they're known for. In August 1982, Commodore launched the Commodore 64, aka the C64. It was a personal computer that company execs claimed they rivaled the $1,000 Apple II in power, but sold for $600.
Whoa.
And by next January, Commodore was shipping 25,000 C64s a month, and this propelled Commodore into tremendous financial success, just like huge. So it actually says in the book that if you bought 100 shares of Commodore International stock in 1977 for $2, you would have $70,000 in 1983.
Oh, man. What would it be at now? Nothing, because Commodore doesn't exist.
Yeah. This is a turning point we talked about last week, though, definitely when home computers are starting to take over for video gaming.
Oh, yeah. What other... we got some other consoles around this area, right?
Oh, we do. We have Coleco.
The Connecticut Leather Company?
The Connecticut Leather Company.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, also, actually, real quick, right now, I'm going to play a commercial for Commodore just so you kind of get that. So we'll be right back after this commercial break.
Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore's keeping up with you. In a world of fun and fantasy, and ever-changing views, and computer terminology, Commodore reviews. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore's keeping up with you. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore's keeping up with you.
And we're back. Did you like that? Did you like that commercial?
I love that commercial.
That commercial.
Are you keeping up with the Commodore?
Because the Commodore's keeping up with you.
Oh, man. The best part of that, too, is you can't see it on the podcast, but they do this like head tip thing. Everybody does the same thing. It's really great. We should include it in the show notes.
Yeah. I'll definitely post a video of it on the website for sure. So now we're going to talk about the Coleco. What does it stand for again?
The Connecticut Leather Company.
Thank you, Tyler. Arnold Greenberg began to be nervous about the crash, and in 1982, the company branched in two directions. First direction, home computing. Coleco abandoned all work on the ColecoVision and decided to work on Greenberg's pet project, the Atom computer.
Okay. It's a good name for a computer.
It is. The Atom computer was really unique because it had two models. The first model was a master console that had an audio cassette, which I guess is how they pulled data back then, right? That's
Yeah.
like you would use an audio cassette.
That was like the cheaper way to
tape
do.
cassette, I guess, not audio.
Floppies existed back then. They were more expensive than tapes. They were way faster though.
Yeah, they were way faster.
Yeah.
Then it had a slot for cartridge games, so you could still play your ColecoVision games. It had a letter quality printer and a 75 key keyboard.
That's a lot of keys.
You got all that for $600.
Whoa.
But there was also a model that plugged directly into your ColecoVision for $400.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so you could just keep your ColecoVision and then run a Atom computer.
All right.
So Coleco promised 500,000 units of this in 1983, but production took longer than they had hoped, and only 100,000 units were on store shelves that year.
Oh, that's not great. Because,
No, it was pretty bad.
Yeah, if your partners that you're selling things to think they're going to be selling something that they're not selling, feels bad, man.
Yeah, so the second direction they went in was the toy business. Greenberg heard of a guy near Cleveland, Georgia, who had a small toy business called Appalachian Artworks. His name was Xavier Roberts. He was a 28-year-old college dropout whose hand-sculpted dolls became so popular, he started his own business. The dolls were actually adopted, not purchased, and they had adoption certificates with them and stuff, and they were sometimes delivered by people dressed as doctors and nurses on a bed of cabbage.
A bed of cabbage, you say?
Interesting.
Kids?
Kid.
From a bed of cabbage?
Yeah, I wonder what that means. But Greenberg loved the idea and wanted to mass market them, so he licensed them and changed the name to Cabbage Patch Kids.
Oh, I knew that sounded familiar.
Yeah. They made $2.5 million in 1983.
Whoa.
And thanks to some amazing marketing by Al Kahn, the senior VP of marketing at Coleco, they had a huge hit on their hands. Like, essentially, the Cabbage Patch Kids sold out as quickly as Coleco could make them.
It was the Tickle Me Elmo of its day.
Exactly. This is actually what's kind of started that whole thing of like people rioting in toy stores or people buying all the dolls for the MSRP of $25 and then flipping them for $100.
Dang.
Yeah, this is all started with the Cabbage Patch Kid. Not even these dolls though could save Coleco.
Not even they could sell them for so much. What happened?
I don't know. The Atom computer had more than half of the computers they shipped in 1983 returned as defective. They didn't spend a proper amount of time debugging, and the Atom, by that time they fixed it, was way too late. So Coleco tried to save itself. Like, this took a big hit on them, by the way. Even with Cabbage Patch Kids, I think this whole Atom computer debacle put them under. Yeah.
That's a bummer.
They tried to purchase Trivial Pursuit in 1986 as a way to save them, and they purchased it, but again, they kind of missed the fad. So they ended up filing for bankruptcy in 1988.
Atari kind of did that too before they went down. They were just like trying to buy up all these different licenses and stuff. Like, that doesn't seem like it's a very successful tactic when you're going under.
There's a couple of things I looked at too, like the whole idea of austerity for saving a business, which is what the guy we mentioned before did at Atari, the new Morgan, the new CEO, like just cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting and getting rid of people or employees and moving stuff to different. It's just, I don't know how. Has it ever really worked? I don't know. Like,
yeah, I'm sure
I'm
there
not
are
a business person. I don't know.
I'm sure there are examples of it working somewhere where it's like, oh, we cut everything and then we were able to establish a baseline and rebuild from there, I guess. But,
yeah. So now we're going to talk about Mattel.
Okay. They made the Intellivision.
That's correct.
The Mattel Intellivision.
The Mattel Intellivision. It's fun to say really fast. Yeah. The book says it's hard to find out exactly what happened to Mattel, but they kept having to drop the hardware price to sell Intellivisions. Like, I think it went from like 50 to 40 to 30 to 20. Like, they were trying to get rid of these things. And then in October of 1983, Mattel had a $201 million deficit. And they laid off 600 employees. And this is Mattel Electronics, not Mattel, the toy company we're talking about here.
Right.
Mattel Electronics. Mattel Electronics Senior Vice President of Marketing and Sales, Terrence Valesky, thought that since 3 million people already owned the Intellivision, that it actually was doing pretty well. Like, it was a good product. So he said, you know what? I'll take the Intellivision and make my own company called Intellivision Inc., eventually become INTV, and sell them through there and try to rebuild this brand. But at that point, the video game market, as we mentioned it before, had already crashed, and that failed. And Intellivision was never seen again in the industry. And I'm pretty sure Mattel Electronics was like not gone, but restructured into Mattel. So
yeah, because Mattel still exists. So
yeah, I mean,
something.
they're still a toy company. So it just, that was the death of the Intellivision, though.
R.I.P. Intellivision.
Yeah, it was a big time bummer. But the last thing we want to talk about today is Nolan Bushnell's Freedom Day party.
Oh, because he had signed a non-compete for 7 years. What do you do when your waiting period's up?
Now we're going to have a big old party to celebrate the end of the do not compete agreement. Warner was already suing him, by the way, because they found out about Sente at this point. So he was being sued, but he's like, I'm going to hold this giant party anyway. And his party had exotic animals like lions and tigers and giraffes from Marine Worlds, Africa, USA. And he filled a warehouse with fake volcanoes and rivers. And he popped out of a box at 10:08 to symbolize his freedom and announce like his next big concept.
Wow.
And that concept...
Oh, I'm so excited for this.
Arcade machines.
Oh, I'm already on board.
With changeable cartridges.
Okay.
It's not a new idea. Nintendo actually already did this. They already had arcade machines that would change out cartridge. But Nolan Bushnell, he really thought this was the future.
So was the idea to like sell the company like one arcade machine and then be like, and then you can switch it out whenever you want with different cartridges?
Yeah, and then you buy so it's like they have home consoles at their arcade. They can just switch everything out. So if they need like, oh my gosh, Miss Pac-Man's super popular right now, we'll have more Miss Pac-Man machines by changing out the cartridges.
Oh, okay. So if you had 5 arcade machines and they were all 5 different games and one game is really taken off, you can cheaply switch those other arcades to be that game.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting to me because I feel like it is a little bit in that idea of enhancement boards.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like especially because if you can update a game by changing a cartridge instead of like fixing the whole cabinet, that's what you'd want to do.
Yeah,
so
makes sense.
It was. I mean, he thought it was the future, and he even strong-armed distributors, saying they had to buy all of the hardware up front if they wanted to get in on this, and a lot of them actually agreed to it because he was Nolan Bushnell and he was like the father of arcade games. So like this guy knows. He knows what's up.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, Sente, as I said before, was a part of Pizza Time Theaters. It was a subsidiary of that. And when that went under, Sente was tainted in the market.
Not able to...
Yeah, he wasn't able to save it. Bally ended up buying that company in 1984. But the hardware for Nolan Bushnell's interchangeable cartridge arcade machines was way too expensive. He didn't get it figured out, and Bally shut it down shortly afterward.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah, so he had this thing, and because he was Nolan Bushnell, people just bought into it.
Yeah, and it was like a cool idea, but it's at the wrong time because arcades are not doing great right now. So people are like hesitant to buy arcade machines. On the one hand, you could say, well, maybe they'll be more likely to buy this because it's a larger upfront investment, but like smaller on the back end, right? Of like, okay, so if these fail, we can swap them out easily and quickly and cheaply. But on the other hand, if your arcade machines aren't selling and you don't really care about it anymore, you just don't want to buy them.
It would have been a great idea in 1980.
Yeah, it would have been a great idea in 1980.
Yeah, so, but yeah, that's the whole chapter called The Aftermath. I think they really wanted to... It's interesting because I think it does a good job of introing, okay, here we go. Commodore home computers are coming into play.
Yep.
And now Coleco's gone, Mattel is gone, and essentially Bushnell and Atari, as of right now, are gone.
Yeah.
So next week, the chapter is called Album Covers.
Ooh.
And I am going to wait a whole week to figure out what that means.
Can't wait.
I'm gonna leave the audience on a cliffhanger to be like, what does album covers mean? I don't know. Again, if you want, you can follow along with us with the book, The Ultimate History of Video Games by Stephen L. Kent. I don't know if we mentioned that up top, but that is how you can follow along with us. That's the book we're using. It's a great book, too. It's just fun to read.
Yeah, it is just a good book.
It's a good read. It's really interesting. There's a lot of stuff we're not mentioning in here. We're kind of going over the basic structure of the history, going through with what we think is most important.
Yeah.
And, like, again, there's that story about his shady dealings from Jack Tramiel. So there's a lot of stuff we're skipping over. There's a lot of stuff you can find in the book. Recommend you read it.
It's only $5 on Kindle.
Yeah, $5 on Kindle, and then I think the paper copy, and it looks like a big old textbook. It's fun, and it's got some very interesting things in it. I'll just flip the book into the microphone. That's what I'll do. Professional podcasting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, if you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. I am on Twitter at Micoletta. Tyler's on Twitter at Sneaker Elf.
ELPH.
Yeah. You can also find us. We're both on Facebook if you just search our names.
Yep, that's true.
And now, Tyler, what you been playing?
I've been still playing Destiny.
Yeah.
Still, I finished a couple missions of Splinter Cell Double Agent this morning because I'm working my way through that series.
Yeah.
I actually played a little bit of Halo Wars last week.
How was that? I've never played it.
It's okay. It's on Game Pass, so...
That's the big news to me, I think, about this whole possibility of Xbox One having keyboard and mouse support is games like Halo Wars and stuff and Zoo Tycoon and that new Jurassic Park Evolution game or whatever, that would work really well with a mouse and keyboard.
Yeah. So yeah, that's exciting. I feel like there was something else I was playing recently, but I can't remember off the top of my head what it was.
I am almost done with Red Dead Redemption 1
Nice.
in preparation for 2, but I was telling, like I told you before we started, I am getting into like the end of the game. I have 3 missions left, main story missions, and I'm starting to feel nostalgic about my very short amount of time because I've been powering through essentially. So I decided to do a little bit of like the side stuff, the gang hangouts and the Strangers and Freaks missions or whatever, and they're really fun. Like just get it, like the whole atmosphere. So that I think that's the selling point of that game. It's just
The atmosphere
feels
real
like
good.
the Wild West. It's
Yeah.
so cool,
It's
and
great.
I am so excited for the next one now.
Yeah, it's super good. I also been playing Fortnite on Switch.
Oh, that's the
because
big
it just
one.
came out on Switch, and I gave in and I made a new account because I had been playing on PlayStation, and you can't use the same account on Switch and PlayStation. So I made a new account for my
Mind-boggling.
Switch. I duoed with my buddy last night or a couple nights ago, and we got top 5. I still haven't won a game of Fortnite because I'm bad. But
Fortnite's hard.
it's really hard.
It's a lot of jumping.
Yeah. So
Watch the
we
pros.
almost won.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's cool.
By the way, I feel like that whole Sony cross-platform thing, like if we talk about this year's 10 years from now when we're still doing this podcast about the history
When
of
we're
cross-platform
redoing this.
play,
Yeah.
it's going to be like, that's going to be brought up because Sony is really dropping the ball.
They're really dragging their feet here, and it's sort of hitting a little bit of a critical mass, especially with Fortnite. Like, there's always been kind of rumblings of like cross-platform play, especially last generation. There was like, oh, we could do it, but we don't want to, and it was Microsoft that was kind of dragging their feet. But it wasn't a big deal at the time. It was just like, oh yeah, that would be really cool, but nobody really ever expected it to happen. But now that games like Rocket League and Fortnite are doing it and actually making it happen with like crossplay with PC and stuff like that, and these are big games that are sort of popular, when a company like Sony is dragging their feet, it really looks bad for them, and I think they're going to cave pretty soon.
I think so too, and I hope it goes to other games. Like we were talking about Destiny.
Oh,
it would be
man.
so great if they could make that cross-platform.
Yep.
Pretty much, because I do feel that any massive multiplayer online game, whether it's like a looter shooter like Destiny or your standard issue MMO like World of Warcraft or Elder Scrolls Online, there's no reason for those not to be crossplay.
Yeah. Final Fantasy 14 is between PS4 and PC.
Oh yeah.
You can totally play with however many you want. Final Fantasy 11 was like that too. It was crossplay PS2, PC, and Xbox 360.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That was like revolutionary.
Yeah, it was pretty neat, but the game wasn't that popular, so it was just like oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I feel like Minecraft is another game that could be across everything.
Oh yeah,
'Cause
they
already do
have
it.
a lot of crossplay with Minecraft.
Yeah, because my PC, I was so confused when my Xbox One started downloading another Minecraft one day, and I'm like, "What is this?" And it was the Minecraft that crosses with PC
Yeah,
and
it plays
everything.
with PC and I think Switch also.
Yeah, and I think your phone
Yeah,
crosses with it too, which
it's
is
doing
pretty
the Fortnite,
crazy.
and
yeah.
Sony's dragging their feet again.
It's one of those things that it needs to happen, and hopefully Sony gets their act together.
Yep. I hope that they're doing the math, and like somebody there must be doing the math and going, yeah, the amount of goodwill we're losing in terms of like PR is worth the amount of money we'd be losing if we did this. I guess I don't know how you
Yeah.
do that math, but somebody has made the calculation and decided, yes, let's be jerks about this.
Yeah, we can't do it because I think especially with Sony and Microsoft, they can't help any. They don't want to do anything that helps the other person.
Yeah.
And by person, I mean company.
Well, Microsoft doesn't care because they're the ones that's behind right now. So if it gives people a reason to not dump their platform, they are all on board. Sony, it's like it would give people a reason to not buy their platform if they.
That's true.
Yeah.
I do think one thing that Microsoft's doing great is the whole PC thing, where the Play Anywhere thing.
Yeah.
It's great. I
Yeah,
love that.
I think Microsoft's future is they operate the Xbox platform, which is basically a Steam store, right? They sell games on this Xbox platform. If you want to play them, you can either buy an Xbox, which we sell, which when I say we, I say Microsoft, right? Which Microsoft sells. You
Tyler
can
does
buy a
not work for
PC.
Microsoft.
I do not work for Microsoft. You buy a PC where you can also play these games. I think at the end of the day, Microsoft doesn't care where you play your games as long as you buy them from them, and they are uniquely positioned to make money off of selling you games on both Xbox and PC and making it as easy as possible to play between those.
Big question: is Halo Infinite going to be PC release?
is.
Right? Oh, it is.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's confirmed.
That's going to be great.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Pretty much every exclusive like first party game that Microsoft is publishing or
Sea of
developing.
Thieves.
Yeah, Sea of Thieves, all those like
Decay.
there's not a whole lot of them because Xbox has no games. But all of the games that they're making, they're putting on Game Pass, and they're making PC crossplay, or not necessarily crossplay, but cross buy. So you buy it and you can play it on your PC or your Xbox.
That's great. I'm excited.
Me
Well,
too.
yeah, the world's getting connected, people, and it's a positive thing. Do you have anything you want to plug or anything before we go?
No, that's it.
I'm going to selfishly plug my stand-up comedy. I will be at Spokane Comedy Club on July 5th through the 7th
And that's in Washington.
in Spokane, Washington. I'm going to be featuring, I'm doing the middle spot, doing 30 minutes. So it'd be great to see you. If anyone listens in Spokane, that would mean the world to me if you came out. I'll probably take a picture with you and text it to Tyler.
Oh, I would love that.
And be like, there's a person that listens. And it'll be exciting. Yeah. Also, thank you again to the people that have rated and reviewed and subscribed to the podcast. It'd be great if you could do it some more. If you listen, we really like a rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher. We're actually on all three, iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play.
Nice.
So if you could review us on one of those, that would be amazing. And again, just get the word out. If you want to tell your friends about it, if they're into video games, let them know, because we don't really do a lot of advertising at all for the podcast. So we're just kind of relying on word of mouth. So thank you so much for listening. And you want to say bye to everybody, Tyler?
Yeah, goodbye, everybody.
This has been a Podaholics Comedy Network presentation. Podaholics.com